Hi, this is M.R. Rangaswamy here, the founder of Indiaspora. And we are now very close to finishing up our great day. We had a session in the morning and now again this evening. And next up is our keynote. Vidya Shah was an entrepreneur. She and her husband started EdelGive in India, very successful financial services firm. And now she's a philanthropist who is the CEO of EdelGive, which is doing amazing work during the COVID time and even before. And so Vidya is going to talk about her North Star. And we're delighted that she was able to get up really bright and early in the morning and join us today. So welcome, Vidya, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, MR. And it's an absolute delight to be here. And, you know, when Ashish and you asked me to speak and, you know, I decided to speak about the true norths. I know Sachi just spoke about the North Star as well. And a lot of what I'm going to say would probably be preaching to the converted. So please do forgive me if I, you know, sound a little more sort of recommendatory than otherwise. And it's truly really about, you know, my experiences over the last 12 years of really working in the field of philanthropy. So I'd like to actually start by going back in a sense to history, and history does teach us several lessons, some which we choose to forget and some which we cannot help but revisit. Today I wanted to just spend the first few minutes of this speech reflecting on some of the events from history that could shape a lot of our understanding of the context in which we live today. In 1347, so more than 700, almost 700 years ago, 12 ships from the Black Sea docked in Sicily. Came as the plague would come to be known. Over the next 5 years, the Black Death would kill more than 20 million people in Europe, almost 1/3 of the continent's population. Now, these were still the Middle Ages, yet it was global trade that enabled the rapid spread of the plague. China, India, Persia, and Egypt were all affected. Of course, it was the Middle Ages, so the stars were blamed for the affliction, and scholastic medicine was still a very nascent science. The feudal system had begun to break down, and this with the plague caused big labor shortages. In England in 1381, this and an abhorrent poll tax caused the peasants to revolt. So the relative standing of capital and labor were reversed, and these Middle Ages between roughly 400 BC and 1400 AD were regarded as a time of ignorance, oppression, and superstition. But it seems as if this, you know, almost cataclysmic event began to change the way the Middle Ages, or began to end actually the Middle Ages. And new thinking was already underway. It was in the form of the Renaissance. Artists reclaimed ancient techniques for drawing and painting with perspective. Musicians recovered melody. Humanism unsettled the stagnant rule of religion over people's minds. There was Michelangelo, Da Vinci, Palladio, Brunelleschi, Boccaccio, several people who became foundation stones of European thought. There was Columbus and Vespucci, you know, who changed the map of the world. There was Galileo, who established the scientific method. So the Renaissance was perhaps the greatest efflorescence of science and art in Western civilization. And this rebirth came on the back of a pandemic that is estimated to have killed between 75 million and 200 million people worldwide. So the point of all this narration of, you know, 700-year-old history is really to say that perhaps we are at another point in time when society will have to make radical adjustments. Hopefully it will be for good, but it could be for ill. At 8 a.m. on March 24th this year, as COVID-19 began to threaten the world, our Prime Minister Modi announced a countrywide lockdown for 3 weeks. At that time, it was 3 weeks. But it ended up being one of the strictest lockdowns in the world, and only hindsight will tell us if the lockdown served the purpose of reducing infections and deaths from COVID. Of course, the impact on lives and livelihood has been tremendous, but the pressure has been most significant on the bottom of the pyramid. Migrant workers, slum dwellers, daily wage workers, even domestic help. This impact has been quite debilitating. We have a fragile health system, and our government machinery, our civil society machinery has been struggling to work at district levels to provide food and relief support. Each one of us is doing our little bit. But if we look back in the future at what we have done, how would we judge ourselves? In any disaster, there are spectators and there are participants. History judges us by how we have behaved and what we have done. And so my question is, will we really see a new renaissance for humanity, or will we forget, especially in India, the blue skies and the clean air that many of us have experienced for the first time? Will we go back to the old ways of living and consuming? So COVID-19 actually has given me this rare opportunity to reflect on my own journey. It has brought me back to the very essence of why I decided to start EdelGive Foundation in the first place. Over 12 years ago, as CFO of Edelweiss, it was a conscious call for me to step down from business and willingly embrace philanthropy as my future with the creation of EdelGive Foundation. In our journey of supporting over 150 NGOs, EdelGive has had the opportunity to work with some extremely impactful organizations, some of whom, or most of whom actually, are supporting the most vulnerable communities in the hinterlands of India. In this unique cohort, I found a large opportunity to use my experience from the financial services sector to support them. Much of the value we achieve in the world emerges from finding our purpose, big or small. I truly felt that I had found my purpose. And this purpose, backed by a set of values, I think has brought me this far. Now, once again, we find ourselves questioning our purpose, particularly as funders. I'm sure that 6 months ago, our inboxes, all of us here on this group, began overflowing. Our inboxes, we were all, overwhelmed with requests for support, messages about COVID, requests for financial support from NGOs that either we knew well or did not. The pressure for action and response was indeed very intense. I was myself very concerned. In fact, I was very confused about the response that we at EdelGive should provide, the stand we should take. But ultimately, we went back to first principles. What can we do and what do we do best? So having lived the last 6 months relying on our first principles, I bring to you today 3 of the most important learnings for me that have helped me find my purpose. Firstly, risk-free philanthropy is a myth. We cannot be assured 100% that our capital will be used exactly in the way we envision. And I have learned this the hard way. In 2008, when EdelGive was just starting out, we were investing in programs based largely on intuition and basic understanding of the organizations that we were in touch with. Some of the investments we went on to make, we call grants investments in EdelGive. Some of them went on to become mature organizations. Some absolutely missed the impact mark. But we stayed afloat. We were agile. We learned along the way. We found our focus areas. So over the years, we've realized, and we all know this, that social issues are unstructured. They're messy. They're complex. When one is dealing with communities, cultures, and social change, one cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach for all engagement. So this, push and pull, this agility is what has kept us going through the years. Particularly if you look at the Indian context, it is very hard to replicate programs step by step, even at villages which are perhaps only 20 miles apart. The landscape, the geography, the demography, all changes. And so it alters so quickly that you're left having to continuously evolve and adapt your strategies. So we may not have all the answers. We may try to make ourselves risk-free, but let's be honest, is that even possible? In our case, we chose to rely on our NGOs who are closer to reality and bring us the voices of the grassroots. Their voice in this decision-making has always taken precedence. So we found their suggestions in turn reduced our risks. Once we had found our purpose, it is important to trust the people we have chosen to be as partners in this process and help them achieve the goals we are collectively working toward. So this brings me to my second most important learning, which is really building a robust back-end system. So who doesn't like to be in the driver's seat? Who doesn't like to be known as a game changer, as a funder of innovation, as a funder of scale? But while this forward-looking attitude is of course warranted, it needs to be backed by a robust back-end system which can help build your credibility in the sector. Very early in EdelGive, we invested in creating this back-end system which could build our base for strategic philanthropy. Our ambition was much bigger than our reality in those days. And we invested in IT, we invested in robust monitoring systems, in compliance, in governance structures, and most importantly, in skilled and talented employees who could use these systems efficiently. And this has enabled us the bandwidth to select and support NGOs at a much larger and faster rate. And it has helped build our credibility as a platform of choice for philanthropy in India. So today, EdelGive is known for collaborative funding. We're engaged in 6 large collaborative initiatives from education, climate change, water and women, and the edgier side of women's empowerment around violence and access to legal justice. And we work with several grassroots organizations as well as international and national partners. And because of this approach, we were able to leverage and influence 10 times over than if we had just engaged individually. We were able to serve 150 NGOs, reach really far out places in India, the back and beyond, through many partners. And so from a small corpus of $100,000 when we began about 12 years ago, today we are able to commit over $12 million a year annually to our NGOs and also reach over 1.4 million people in the process. Finally, there's no real shame in co-learning. It is okay not to have all the answers. It is okay to reach out to others who might have some of them for you. And I credit my learning in the early years to the conversations I had with both NGOs and funders. And these conversations enabled me to understand in much depth the circumstances around which our organizations were functioning. I also pushed my contemporaries and my peers to share their experiences with me, and wherever possible, I shared the stories I had learned with them. As the third richest man on the planet, when Warren Buffett decided to engage in philanthropy, he approached his old friends, Bill and Melinda Gates. And that act was the catalyst for bringing to life the Giving Pledge, one of the most powerful platforms for billionaires to commit to contributing half of their wealth to philanthropy. So this ability to reach out to each other, to lean on each other, can have massive positive effects. So these are the three learnings. One, that risk-free philanthropy is a myth. Second, the value of a solid back-end process. And third, that there is no shame in co-learning, that have informed everything I have done. They have changed me as a person, and built EdelGive into one of India's leading grant-making organizations. I want to leave you with these three learnings, but also with the understanding that the world cannot wait for our learning to be complete. We need to spend a lot of time to think, to deliberate, strategize, but also we need to rely on each other's strengths, trust our expertise, and act. We shouldn't forget that almost 820 million people go hungry every day across the world. Over 250 million children and youth are still out of school, and 10% of the world's population lives on less than $1.90 a day, showcasing poverty as a global challenge that shamefully we are yet to solve. So there is a lot we have to do collectively, and it is time to make our small beginnings, and it is in doing that we become better philanthropists. Anyone who's struggling to take a step or needs assistance, I'm very happy to personally engage, to help, and to learn from you. As I wrap up, I want to leave you with two interesting concepts that have left me energized even in these dark times. One is a TED talk by Professor Martin Seligman, who's also known as the founder of positive psychology, a field of study that examines healthy states such as happiness and optimism. He speaks of happiness in three ways. Happiness can be the pleasant life, a great book, a great movie, a new purchase, a big house, a big car, a great vacation. But happiness can also be engagement, any activity that enables intense concentration and absorption, a state of flow when you're in the zone and you cannot feel anything else, as we do when we learn music or learn a new language. But happiness that comes from meaning or purpose is of the highest quality, and it is most enduring. The second is from Professor Michael Norton, who postulates that money can buy happiness only if you spend that money on others who have more need of it, a gift for others, a charitable donation. So to all of us, I say, as in this group, as those with affluence and influence, spending on other people has a much higher return for you than spending on yourself. If you think you cannot buy happiness, then you are not spending it right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vidya, for that inspiring talk. We do have some time for questions. So if people want to raise their hand on Zoom, I can call upon them. But in the meanwhile, Vidya, I wanted a question for you, which is, looking back at your journey, is there something you would have done differently now that you've gone through this journey on day one?
I think, when we started out, we said that we were bringing the learnings of the for-profit world to the not-for-profit world, the business concepts, the management concepts. How do you build great organizations even in civil society? I wish I had paused and seen how much more actually the for-profit world can learn from the not-for-profit world. I think that pause and that thinking, because it has been tremendous, and we've used these last few years in particular to document that and to see how we can actually do business with a lot more thoughtfulness and empathy, while still keeping the profit motive and the market cap maximization motive. But there's so much more you can do in building a for-profit enterprise that borrows from some of the values, that civil society organizations carry. And I wish I'd spent more time and not sounded arrogant saying we are bringing learnings from the for-profit to the not-for-profit, and not see that as an exchange.
Thank you. We have a question from Ken Silverman. So Ken, could you unmute yourself and ask the question, please?
Certainly, thank you. First, congratulations to you, MR, and Sanjeev and your team. This has been an extraordinary evening, afternoon, and morning in India. And thank you, Vidya. That was inspirational. My question is this: how has the increased religious division in India over the past half decade and more impacted philanthropic outreach and impact?
I think it has made our work a lot more difficult. It has made the work of our NGO partners on the ground a lot more difficult. I think issues of human rights and issues of caste and class have been reported a lot more, and therefore it has sort of put a lot of pressure, particularly on Indian philanthropy, to do something about Indian issues and not really rely always on, you know, the foundations that have traditionally focused on issues like this, like Ford or the Gates Foundation. The other thing that has happened is if you look at the issues of, say, for example, one of the areas that we work in, which is social and the economic empowerment of women. And on the social empowerment side, we found a lot of issues around violence, access to legal justice. And we've had to actually push ourselves in that one area to look at very innovative ways of addressing these issues. So we've actually had to find organizations that can use information technology combined with great communication and great outreach to communities. So especially in the area of women empowerment, to be able to include men and boys in a very creative way has been, you know, an interesting challenge for us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vidya. Thank you for getting up early and joining us, but it's getting pretty late here. I know for folks on the East Coast, it's past 10 o'clock. So thank you so much for joining us. And I want to turn the floor back to Ashish on our side.
Thanks, Amar, and thank you, Vidya, for sharing your story and the lessons learned. And also, thank you for the compelling call to action at the end. This concludes our Philanthropy Summit. We have had an incredible day, starting with session 1 this morning that focused on India, and session 2 focused on US and the diaspora. We would like to thank each of our 36 speakers and panelists and over 400 attendees who participated in the 2 sessions. In closing, I would like to highlight 3 points to summarize the day. Number 1, while we all acknowledge that we have a long way to go to reverse the setback that the development sector has suffered in the past 6 to 7 months, I think we must pause and celebrate the initial successes that we've had, where the community and the diaspora has really come together with a lot of energy and intent. So that needs to be celebrated. Number 2, the pandemic has brought to the forefront issues and challenges that have existed for many years. So whether it's the migrant worker situation in India or the equity gap that exists in the US that disproportionately impacts marginalized communities, I think we need to acknowledge it and we need to collectively work towards addressing these challenges and gaps. And finally, we all agree that this is a huge opportunity for all stakeholders for new, bold, and innovative collaborations. And based on the conversations that we've had today, it's clear that, you know, we are all eager to not let this opportunity pass. So from all of us at Indiaspora, thank you all for joining us. Happy Gandhi Jayanti and good night.